have some of the customers of SADA. Thank you for joining. What we are going to do is, we'll have an active discussion. Seth is here. He's a senior cloud engineer for SADA. And Govind Rangasamy from my side, the CEO and founder of the company. A little bit of housekeeping. On the right-hand side, if you are not familiar with GoToMeeting, you have a chat area where you can ask your questions. And for those of your team members that who is not able to attend today, the webinar will be recorded and distributed within the TAM community as well as ESM community of SADA, so that you can also forward that to your customers at will. And if there are questions that we cannot address because of time constraints or any other reason, please reach out to us directly through Seth or through some other means. So with that, thank you for joining. Seth, if you could just go ahead and introduce, and we'll start from here.
Sure. So thanks for everybody for attending today. My name is Seth Moffitt. I'm a senior cloud engineer here at SADA. My whole role here at SADA is to help customers understand the cloud, to help them understand what makes GCP unique, and then I'm also assigned for long-term success. So a lot of initiatives out there. I'm a big proponent that our job in the cloud is never really done. So as we're looking to refactor and take advantage of new products and features that Google as well as just cloud providers have in general, I'm always here to be that technical sounding board and to help guide through implementation, adoption, and further future iteration. So with that, Govind, thank you for inviting us here and helping and having us co-host this. But yeah, go ahead and I'll be looking in the chat for any of those questions. So as we're going through the topics today, guys, bringing them on through. Me and Govind will be more than happy to address those towards the end of it. But with that, I'll pass it right back over to you, Govind.
Wonderful, Seth. Thank you. Really appreciate joining us. And from our side, Govind Rangasamy, CEO and founder of the company. We have been at the Cloud Application Resilience overall concept, as well as bringing that capability to Google Cloud. We have been at it for almost like 4 years now. And we have helped a number of customers to be resilient or more resilient compared to what they used to be as soon as they get on the platform, on GCP platform rather, and also continuously building the capabilities as GCP continue to grow. For example, a recently launched GCP, the VMware engine, is now supported with Cloud Application Resilience capabilities. So with that, let's get started. We are going to just talk about application resilience from the context of a dynamic and ever-changing GCP environment. Gartner recognized us last year. They have been pushing cloud resilience as a concept, as a kind of an innovation on top of the basic backup and recovery long time ago. And then we came along as a company, as a tool, as a management platform on top of the cloud native applications. They really kind of recognized us immediately, saying that we are innovating on top of backup and recovery industry that hasn't changed much since perhaps the VMware days. VMware really changed that industry, and companies like Veeam and others got started. And now it's another set of innovation that wasn't possible before. So when you think about Appranix and why with GCP in particular, there are mainly 3 different reasons. One is, GCP is our platform as well, right? We are in particular a SADA customer as well, right? So we run on top of GCP, we leverage all the capabilities of GCP, and we are an account in our own SaaS. So we eat our, I don't want to say dog food as such, but we drink our Kool-Aid before even the capabilities get to the customers. Appranix billing is integrated with GCP. So when SADA sells GCP through commitments or otherwise, all the billing are completely integrated with GCP platform. And when you compare with other platforms, this is another advantage that we highlight. We also support AWS and Azure, but in particular, why we sell more with GCP apart from the top two reasons, is that GCP also gives that tremendous cost savings compared to AWS storage or Azure storage, right? Because of the global replication capabilities built into GCS. So for all these three reasons, we have actually helped SADA win a couple of accounts from other cloud providers, particularly LoadSpring and so on. And then there are two services that are listed on the marketplace. When your customers when you go out directly and search for Appranix Cloud Application Resilience, will pop up. So this is where you actually subscribe. On the left-hand side, if your customers are approaching through Kubernetes or in a GKE point of view, they can directly configure an operator of Appranix as well. So there are two different ways you could get in, but the actual subscription happens with the right-hand side one, which is basically the service that you can get into. Now, when we talk about application resilience as opposed to the traditional backup and DR, the capability that we are talking about is so far ahead in terms of the ability to cover an entire application environment. When workloads move to the cloud, they become a lot more dynamic, and also the scale at which with which customers operate those environments also changes, right? The automation with auto scaling or load balancers, the system, the platform, the cloud platform itself can continuously spin up more and more instances, right? That's why when it comes to application resilience, it's the system's ability. When we talk about a system, it's an application environment as such, and the system could be a large Gmail, right? Gmail as a system that operates across multiple geographical regions or global regions. So that's what we call it as a system. When the system goes down, you got to have the ability to recover from any type of failure. Now, this environment is an example of what Appranix can actually recreate and completely recover. Is a financial services application that does $16 billion per quarter, right? And this company has been recovering their entire application environment in a second region multiple times from a DR test perspective and so on. So we kind of blur the lines between backup and DR and high availability. So even when you have your customers configuring your cloud SQL environments between two regions as a kind of read replica and a production instance running two different regions, we can work with that type of environment as well, right? With all the load balances coming up, all the dependencies. So real life example of what Appranix can actually do. So when it comes down to kind of shared responsibility type of model in those environments, right? Google obviously takes care of the infrastructure resilience, be it the compute engine part of the equation, as well as the Kubernetes engine or the recent VMware engine. It's Google's responsibility to spread and make sure the infrastructure is available across multiple regions. And those services are available as a service, obviously, so that you could on demand, or your customers with an on-demand capability can create those resources as necessary. Whereas the applications themselves, the application environment, the resiliency component of that application itself is customer's burden, right? When you think about those applications and think about the multitudes of reasons why those applications might fail, when I put up these and I don't read, I cannot list out all the possible ones, but the ones that come up at the top, whenever we do webinars similar to this one, we ask, what are the top most reasons why applications actually fail in your environment? They say cloud misconfiguration is one of the big reasons, right? Ransomware attacks and bad deployments. Those are like main reasons. And then they go into, yes, once in a while, the Google Cloud Service fails, and very rarely a region failure happens, right? And sometimes when you stress your workloads, a system, then the failures occur. And it's almost like chaos engineering type of induced workload. And that's when it hurts. From a customer point of view, it's not only losing the revenue, but also losing their reputation. And then you pour in lots of precious engineering time and resources apart from them taking care of all the production issues all the time. The SREs in particular are looking out for every one of these failures, and in particular are responsible for the reliability of the application or the system in general. So the solution currently is looking at the traditional way of doing things, right? You could start with typical VM backup and restore. Or, if you look at the olden days of putting some kind of a host-based replication so that your entire VMware environment can be replicated quickly over to another region, another data center rather. Maybe that data center is hosted by a service provider like SunGuard, where you replicate all your VMs over to the other side, all your databases and file systems over to the other side. Third, after moving to GCP, some of these customers have started doing storage snapshots and PD snapshots. Those are great, but when you think about, let's say, 100 virtual machine with 2 to 3 PDs attached to every one of the virtual machines, if you start doing snapshots every hour for 24 hours, you'll end up 5,000 snapshots for 100 virtual machines. And if you just multiply it like let's 500 VMs, then you are now counting 25,000 snapshots. That is not the problem. The problem is not that you have many snapshots and they are cheap to execute and they are fast. But the issue is that how do you really use it? And that's when manual recovery scripts and all of that come into play. So, if you have recently moved away from the data center or you've started creating those dynamic environments on GCP itself, now you'll have to really think about what are the ways that these application environments could really come down. So these traditional systems, they don't discover and analyze the resiliency issues, even telling you whether some of the cloud resources are properly protected or not. Right? And then they tend to put all kinds of proprietary data management systems. They pull the data out of those VMs, and the data management systems themselves run on top of GCP using PDs in the backend or GCS. The conduit is that common file system, and that not only slows down the RPO because you're pulling the data of all the virtual machines, but that is not the biggest concern. The biggest concern is that when you scale, when you do the auto scaling, when you put agents on every one of the systems, after the global load balancer spins up more instances in the backend based on your auto scaling policy, the agents may not even catch up to the backend, the backup manager. So what would be your RPO, whether the RPOs are really satisfied or not, right? And then third is, how do you really recover these things? The default mechanism when you go to the cloud is infrastructure as code. Could be Terraform code or deployment manager code, or combination of all of that driven by your DevOps pipeline. And now if you try to recover those, where would your recovered virtual machine really fit in? Where would your recovered Cloud SQL really fit in, right? And that's when it starts heading. That is just the initial part of it. Now you'll have to really think about what's my security group? What's my size of the VM even, right? And that's when we came up with a very simple, fully managed application resilience service. And this service is being used by a number of SADA customers, right? Please get in touch with it if you want public references and things like that. And there are references that are available if you have access to internal marketing materials and reference materials that GCP partner managers have. If you really need to have that level of conversation, please reach out to us as well. But when it comes down to really using the service, it's very, very straightforward. Let me look at if there are questions here. Happy to take any questions. Perfect. Yep. By the way, I tend to ask, are you able to see my slides? Maybe too late. Once in a while, it gives me trouble. I just wanted to make sure that the slides are visible. Seth,
Yeah,
are you
you've been
able
coming in fine.
Great, thank you. So, onboarding is very, very straightforward, right? You simply subscribe from the marketplace, auto discover. When you ask the service to make a cloud connection and discover your customers' application environments, Appranix automatically reverse engineers all the configurations, all the infrastructure, with a single click, right? I will show you in a demo. And then you simply add the policies based on your requirements, customer requirements, organization requirements. What's my RPO policy? And every hour I need to protect my application instances, or every week, and you can stack them all up. And then you simply go ahead and recover. The cool thing about one of the key use cases is that you could do cold DR. So whenever you want a DR test happen, for example, you don't need to have a secondary environment running all the time. All you need to have is all your snapshots, all your copies of data kept. That is managed by Appranix anyway. And all you have to do is to click the button or touch the button if you're using some kind of iPad and things like that. System automatically recovers and gives you that environment in another region of that GCP, right? As simple as that. And we have done this onboarding, protecting, and doing a simple recovery test over a coffee break many, many times over. So what do we do? How do we really achieve this? When you think about it, think about this application environment, very simple. Running in a couple of different zones in a particular region, the central or the East Coast, as an example, with multiple load balances, with a bunch of databases and so on, with all the dependencies. Appranix goes and discovers all of these resources, dependencies, everything from the GCP environment, and it creates something called a cloud time machine, right? Application environment time machine, and from which you can simply go ahead and recover it. The way we do it is with no agents installed on any of these VMs, or of course, we cannot install anything on the Cloud SQL anyway. And then we back up all the metadata, the size of the virtual machines, the firewall configurations, the routes, and all of that, and all the VPC configurations, the load balances, everything is like on literally a time machine, like a Mac time machine. And then Appranix manages all the cloud data copies. It's all completely incremental. So you make one copy of your environment and the data copies in the backend. And whenever an auto scaling kicks in, automatically those new instances are added, and it is all forever incremental. So incremental copies are cheap, and it is very, very low cost compared to other clouds, as an example. And those copies are managed and become available in the other region. So if you are going from East Coast to the West Coast, or Central to East, or even multiple regions, you simply indicate to Appranix that what are the regions that you are interested in terms of making the copies available. The entire environment will be recovered for you. And Appranix uses infrastructure as code to recover all your instances, which means that we orchestrate and instruct Google Cloud to bring back your environment using the native infrastructure as code. So now even if you give 15,000 lines of code, the environment that I showed you before has 14,000 lines of code at that particular point in time. Now after a month or so, it will be like 25,000, who knows, right? That many number of lines of code is automatically written by Appranix all the time whenever you simply touch the button, right? Then not only that, you can pretty much create a simulation policy to run it. As an example, if you think about an environment running GKE with a bunch of containers and a Cloud SQL spread between two different regions, and then compute instances on the GCE environment running your platform, as an example. I mean, it's a very simple configuration. These ones, Cloud SQL gets copied automatically, all the data replicated to the other region. So it's almost like an always on configuration, plus all the backup copies are also maintained automatically. Now, if the US Central region experiences some kind of a trouble, Appranix will automatically make sure that all the protected instances, all the compute instances, as well as the container components using the second region GKE will be brought up, and the Cloud SQL will be automatically promoted to be a master in the second region, and the load balancer configurations will be established, and the application comes back, right? This is another one. We have done the webinar specifically on this particular application example. If you want to have a reference to that, please let me know. And that is just one of the configurations, right? So when you think about using the platform, you can use it for multiple purposes, not only with the backup and recovery. That is like a table stakes, right? You got to have backup. That's a feature of an application resiliency platform, not in itself is a platform, right? Then you can do cold DRs whenever you need it. You can create newer environments. On the other day, we dialed into another customer requirement saying that we want to copy all our environments running in the central region over to Singapore, right? Because we want to have that environment with all the data and everything available exactly similar to our central region running over in Singapore, so that we can serve Singapore or South Asian customers right there, right? You can do chaos engineering as well, where people are afraid of making production changes by injecting known faults into the system, and people are concerned about it, right? Chaos engineering is a great concept in theory, but when it comes to implementation of it, you got to be able to do it confidently, right, in the production environment. So what we say is that why don't you make a copy of your application environment using incremental data copies? It's all virtual copies, so copies are really quick. And then you can do all the experiments, let's say 90 to 93% of your experiments in the environment, and then you can pretty much run the remaining experiments in the production itself once you are satisfied with that test in the production twin environment in another region, right? So likewise, you can pretty much drive that, and then pricing is built into the marketplace. If you are interested, let's get in touch later on. So with that, see if there are questions. Otherwise, I will do a demo as well, quick demo to give you a flavor of what is possible with Appranix. Any questions so far? All right, let me start the demo, and then from there, if there are questions, we can cover that later on as well. So to start with, you can make a cloud connection. When you think about a cloud connection, if you go into every cloud connection, it's a simple project oriented connection where you include, let's say, if you go in here at a cloud connection, first is GCP for a reason, right? Then you simply cut and paste project ID, select the regions. All the regions are covered, so you can say, this is your DR, not only a second region, but also you can have many regions, right? It is as simple as that. So select all those regions that you're interested or your customer is interested in, and that's it. You connect the cloud. So once you have a connection into the cloud, Appranix discovers all these instances, all the resources. If you go into the TCP load balancer, for example, all the configurations are automatically discovered and kept on a timeline basis. So based on every policy, all this information is kept, all encrypted internally. It's visible only to the customer. And if you go into the instances, all the instance configurations, all of that will be captured all the time. So when you recover something, Appranix knows exactly what the configuration was yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, and so on. And very important, Appranix doesn't take customers' proprietary data into our platform. All the application data, proprietary data, are kept and managed right inside the project itself. We only move the data, we make the copy, we do the copy data management, all of that for backup, recovery, and other use cases purposes completely inside the customer project. We do not pull the data. This is one of the reasons why our system is much faster compared to the traditional backup and recovery. Now, once you have this environment discovered, so if you go into the environment itself, it runs in the central region. You can see multiple projects. So you simply cut and paste this project to discover this project, right? All of that are running in the central region. SQL instances. Our demo application is called Open EMR, Emergency Medical Records. So that demo Cloud SQL is running, and all the load balancers, DNSs, all the necessary plumbing work from a VPC perspective is all captured as well. And the firewalls, all the firewall configurations. Every firewall has very specific configurations within which, DevOps teams or SRE teams might be changing all the time, right? The routes might be changing depending on the type of services coming in. So all of that will be captured as an environment, complete environment capture. Now, once the cloud connection is established, if you look at the assembly is basically an assembly of cloud resources, right? When we say cloud resources, all you have to give is just point out those instances. Everything else will be automatically calculated based on the dependencies that we derive automatically. Based on the firewall rules, based on the load balancer connections or route connections, Appranix automatically discovers and maps all the dependencies, right, to create those resources. Now, what you do is simply add the policies. So if you look at the policies wise, hourly, daily, 30 minutes, even weekly policies, monthly and yearly policies are all incremental. So you make that first copy. If you have 25 terabytes, you simply make a copy of that to the GCS, which is low cost anyway, relatively compared to PDs. And then now all other copies are completely incremental. So if the application change rate is 10%, which is roughly the case, most of them is about 5%. Rarely in the cases people change like audio type of applications, platforms in the backend might be capturing more changes. But depending on the change rate, your data copies will be incremental all the time. The copies will be much faster. So when your customer adds a policy, you simply create a policy, or you can use an existing policy template, right? And you select whatever the schedule that you want. That's it. That's all you have to do. And Appranix automatically creates this time machine. So it looks very, very simple. That is completely intentional. You don't want to complicate things beyond what is necessary. And if you go in, let's say an hourly policy here, all that environment detail will be captured. So going back in time, firewall an hour ago will be captured. So if firewall changed, you have a copy of it. That is why if a firewall is misconfigured, your application is not going to run. Your application is not resilient. If it is resilient, then you should be able to recover that firewall configuration going back, should be able to recreate that instance as it was, along with the data at that particular point in time, along with the configuration. So what we'll do is that let's go back in time and let's do a 30-day, let's go back, weekly policy, right? And May 2nd, go back a little more. Let's go back to April 25th, right? So if you think about it, all that firewall configurations, all of that are captured as of our, last week. And then if I want to recover, I simply click recover. And here you have the option to change it as well, right? All that policy things can be changed. And let's keep it very simple, recovery test. You can use system predefined profile, which is basically the classic instances, or you can also use the preemptible recovery profiler, which would cut down the recovery test. If you are doing the testing, it would cut down the recovery test cost by almost like 70%. Now, if it is like a regular, backup restore type of use case, you can simply click same region recovery, and within that region, if there are conflicts, Appranix will point out that there are conflicts because the IP address might be conflicting with an existing VM that is already running, right? Otherwise, you simply kind of, it will not highlight if there is no conflict, if the VM is dead, completely destroyed, right? Or you can simply recover the entire assembly, which is a complete set of VMs with all the configurations, entire environment rather. Or you simply go to the other region. In this particular case, the instances are running here in the central. We are going to bring up in the East Coast, South Carolina region. Again, specific resources, or you could use your tags to recover as well. By the way, when you want automatic protection of those instances, you can let Appranix know these are the tags to monitor every time a new instance appears in the production environment. You don't have to do anything from a SADA perspective. If you're managing that environment, you don't have to do anything. Customer simply gets a protection based on the tags, right? And similarly, they can go ahead and do self-service recovery as well. If you're doing managed services, you could help them to kind of do the recoveries as a managed service. Now, all you have to do is to click that button and then say, type in recover, because we are going to create the entire environment in the other region. And as you know, customers are worried whenever they create like 100 virtual machine environment or something like that. Even for the testing purposes, they are worried that the cloud bill will spike up. For that, you have an automatic reset. After the test is complete, you could simply say, after whenever you destroy that environment, or you can reset it right away. Or if the customer is doing some kind of a performance testing and so on, you can say, keep it for 4 hours, run your performance test, and after that, system will automatically clean up the entire environment, except the data copies, obviously. And click that button. Recovery will start. If you look at the recovery resources, it will start with the firewall. Which DR system starts with a firewall rule, right? So firewall rules, VPCs, all of that will be automatically created. Your recovery logs for your auditing purposes will be available as well. And in terms of recovery itself, if you go in, you can see Appranix has created the entire environment deployment manager script. So all of that are automatically created. You don't have to touch your keyboard to create all the Jinja templates. It's all our worry, meaning Appranix will have to manage all of that as of last week, right? We are going back to April 25th to create it. So if you look at that environment itself, you can see that environment looks like this, right? All the configurations, all the protocol configurations, dependencies, the tags. You need to manage and maintain those tags when those environments come up in the second region. Otherwise, your management systems, the hub, the cloud hub-based management systems will not be able to manage the recovered environment. So all of that are automatically taken care of, right? This is a very simple one. Appranix wrote about maybe 1,000 lines of code, right? Quickly. And can you imagine, when we recover for another customer, 14,000 lines of code with that same touch of that recovery button, right? So if you think about it, that environment is, so the information is recovered. If you go back here, the recovery is almost getting completed. All the recovery instances have been created. So if you go to the instance side, if you do the refresh, you will see the US Central one, if this is one based one. See, East. I think it should come up with the East one. You can see the instances are coming up on the East Coast now, right? All of that will be available, and the IP addresses will be automatically configured. If there are internal IP addresses within the VPC, within the subnet, those will also be retained so that your instances will talk to each other, right, appropriately. And that's it. If the environment is now available, and if you think about it, the recovery summary itself, it will take a couple more minutes. And if you go back, the protection continues. So protection is not affected. So if your policy is running, the protection is not affected. Now, the recovery is complete. It took 3 minutes, roughly about 3 minutes for all that environment to come up, right? And now, once you have it, you can have resilience insights, and you can go back in time and see what all the protected ones. So for example, if you start with, you can highlight the protected and protected ones, right? That will be available for your customers so that they can protect more. That is one of the highlights that we do. Once the protection is complete, you can go to the protection reports as well. All of that information based on the policies will be available for reporting purposes or recovery reports. You can go back in time. For example, I think I had something around 25th, maybe. One of the recoveries are March 25th, one of those, right? There you go. So one of the recoveries that I had completed when I did the demo to the customer. So March 25th, another recovery. So you can go back in time and get the recovery information for your complaints purposes, right? So with that, we can look at other questions, or if you have questions with respect to the GCE component of it or the container resilience, you can go into discovering the Kubernetes environments. All the namespaces will be covered as well. Or you can have a combination of Kubernetes and an external assembly, service assembly that is running the backend resources, basically all the platforms running on instances as well. So you can have a combination of these to be protected completely and recovered in the other region. Okay, so that's possible. Now, if you have GCVE, those can be added, in the cloud connection for discovery purposes, and can be combined with other instances on GCE as well as GKE and the VMware environment. So you have a comprehensive way to protect entire GCP environments in Appranix. All right, are there any questions?
Yeah, so I was actually checking, Govind. I don't believe I actually have access to the attendees chat here. So if you, I don't know if you see anything on your side there. Otherwise, if we're ready for our back in Q&A, I know we have a couple that we could always bring up, but we'll pass that over to you.
Yeah, I think you can start off those questions that you have already gathered, Seth. Then if people ask additional questions here, we can cover them as well on site.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so I guess just coming from from my perspective here at SADA, I find DR coming up as a topic point, either early on in our discussions, why people are looking to the cloud, also to becomes a kind of on the back end. So it's really DR is just one of those topics that are always relevant, but really I can't say with full certainty it's a beginning day 0 conversation or it's a day 3 or 4 of operations, because really you find that that profile is about everywhere. But really what, one of the questions is as far as DR is, being one of those things that everybody does eventually thinking about, if we were to call it like a specific company and type of, in terms of maturity, so like cloud native, for instance, those who are building in the cloud directly, or those others, for lack of better words, like a legacy environment, where do you find that Appranix really accelerates the adoption of those cloud technologies or the cloud provider itself?
I would say both. But specifically, if you think about customers that are closing down the data center, right, coming over to GCP, and they used to have like a Zerto or a Veeam combination, but when they come over to GCP, there is no DR solution, right? And our solution right away is applicable. Whenever you see those customers, they are absolutely can get on, subscribe, and then it's very easy to protect all their instances and then have a DR, and then they can actually test the DR really quick. Whereas for the cloud native ones, they might be most likely using containers or a combination of containers and the backend. One of the things that they do is that they start with Snapshots. I think they might have realized that there is no equivalent backup product, or maybe that they have found kind of a rough solution using Snapshots. They tend to start with those Snapshots, but eventually when Appranix is introduced, they realize that it is easier to protect or complete that existing snapshot-based use case but go beyond that, much beyond that. The good thing is that Appranix will take over from where they left off, or even you could pretty much do an incremental snapshots right off, where the existing scheduler is running on GCP itself. So there is no kind of a gap between or migration between their existing snapshot tool, the snapshot scripts they have over to Appranix. It's all positive from there because it's taken over directly from a lifecycle management perspective. And additionally, like I said, the entire DR is available.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite callouts for what your tool offers too is that managed snapshots are a thing, but like a snapshot's only backup. It's not a true DR recovery because there's that orchestration component of it. And obviously too, snapshots are there for volumes, for disks. But as you've shown here, there's a ton of other things that go into that. Predominantly the networking and the firewall rules. So being cognizant of that and automatically deploying those, being cognizant of those changes in kind of a real-time fashion definitely helps to address those, where even if you start to drift away from your initial build with something like Terraform, those quick changes just to get developers up and going, all that's captured through your guys' tool. So I think that's always a really compelling story too, to where it's kind of it's something you can use for critical for those who aren't interested in wanting to build their DR, but also for those who are wanting to kind of build it in tangent with it, just kind of it does really put up the guardrails and helps ensure that you have a very clean backup and disaster recovery plan, no matter where you are within your cloud journey.
Right. Hey Seth, there is a question on the chat. Curious on pricing. Is it per resource or storage amount or something? So we do not charge per storage amount. It's per resource, right? The pricing is straightforward. It's on the marketplace, $25 per month per resource. When we say resource, we only count, for example, the instances, the load balancers, the Cloud SQL instances, the GKE worker nodes, not the management nodes, the worker nodes, and so on, right? At some point, we might end up counting the disk because we are kind of adding more and more capabilities. But for now, it is just instances, load balancers, routes, in a VPC, and so on. It's per instance per month.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a good segue too to kind of talk through, there's kind of two components of that I see within DR. So I come from a hardware background, sold Dell hardware, VMware, and designed DR data centers within
the good old days.
The good old days, yeah. And I know you and I have had many a conversation about the good old days. Right. So yeah, I think one of the hardest things was justifying the cost of basically 2x your whatever your infrastructure would be for just staying up and running for DR. Arguably, you're going to need the exact same resources on the other side to fail over to, but right. It's always DR is a parachute, not so much something that you rely on. So you can't necessarily use those additional resources. So and I think this is a perfect segue from the cost of licensing. So maybe we can talk through how you guys are saving costs for more so on the Kubernetes side or things like that, since it's not really you guys are really affecting or allowing I don't want to say cold start because there's a little bit more programmaticness to it, but yeah, you're not having to pay for those resources that aren't being utilized as a DR strategy. Maybe you'd like to tap on that a little bit.
Absolutely, Seth. So, one of the key components here is what we call a cold DR, right? So you don't need to have all those worker nodes available and running, maybe stop, right, on the second region of GCP. You don't need to have the compute engine instances available and running for your DR to take effect in the other region of the cloud, right? So all you have to do is to let Appranix manage the data copies. The data, lifecycle management, all of that, and the replication of it will be managed automatically by Appranix. The rest, as I demonstrated, are automatically recreated at any point in time, right? That way, when you think about it, exactly like you mentioned, is 2.5 times. 2.5 times is not because the exact copy of the production becoming available when the disaster happened the second time, or for DR test purposes, you end up kind of creating. As an example, typical enterprise customers with 100 virtual machines, if they buy a service from SunGuard in the olden days, they will have to not only pay for like per virtual machine basis to keep the configurations, all of that, and additional management, charges and so on. But whenever a customer does a DR test, it's almost like $30K per DR test, right? And typically the service providers would charge 2 times per year, and after that you'll end up paying every time you do additional tests. Like a financial services customer on the other day, they ended up doing a DR test on-prem. They have a bunch of workloads left still in their on-prem environment, and then they are actively migrating to the cloud. They were comparing us with a Zerto-based recovery on the other side. It costed $30K because it's not the Zerto cost, it is the service cost, because the service provider has to put in the servers and all the networking configurations, the operation teams cost. Then you bring up just for that DR test, and then you shut it down and clean up. Now, every time you do that, you pay 30 to 40K for 100 virtual machine environment. And on top of that, the recoveries themselves take quite a lot of time. It's almost like 48 hours for them. Whereas with Appranix, because we are automatically actively monitoring the production environment, actively copying all the metadata, all of that, with no human intervention, the entire environment comes up in the second region within an hour. All the VPCs, all the configurations, 14,000 lines of code without even touching the keyboard, right? This is why when you think about bringing the second Kubernetes environment, the second region of GKE, it is as simple as that, right? All the worker nodes, all the config maps of GKE, all the namespaces, all the containers directly pulled out from the container registry at that particular point in time. Everything will be brought up in the second region, and along with the compute engine resources at that particular point in time, like I showed going back a week ago, right? That is that way, you tremendously save the cost. Now the customers know they can save the cost, which means that they can run more tests, right? So in essence, it automatically enables them to become a lot more resilient than their data center counterparts, right? Another reason to go to GCP.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's one of my, I love the story, and it's also too, like, even going back to the good old days, whenever you had those customers that were looking for 1 hour SLAs and 15 minutes or 5 minutes or absolutely real time, I think your guys' solution really helps helps identify those stopgaps, and to your point, saves you time on having to develop these tools that may only work once, or being proprietary, or just it being code, something you have to continually update and stay on top of. So it's not just a there's a financial investment, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but in time, as well as just another product to develop. So being able to offload that to Appranix really helps out with basically giving you your own SRE team in a lot of ways, in the way that I like to think about it. And so I'm a huge, obviously when you're thinking about application, when you're talking about a true DR and full and true uptime, striving for that zero downtime whatsoever, a lot of it becomes an application conversation, really having to design that up front. And that's something that SADA really strives in, is helping to build those really robust, redundant things, everything from your front ends all the way down to how is your application being structured, and these services talking to one another, even helping to build those resilient databases that I'll throw out the magic stuff out there, like these horizontal or relational databases that allow you to truly have those zero downtime, but being able to have those pieces of it to where we as the developers don't have to worry about DR anymore. Just the infrastructure itself just automatically self-discovers and self-deploys as needed, or self-heals. Becomes a really compelling offer, and a lot of these things you just don't quite get out of the box with everything. I love the story. I love how you guys have identified that hole in there and have built such a beautiful and robust product to help solve those.
Absolutely. And then you stress that point of developer centric, right? this is another change from the traditional ways, because when developers create their application or code the GCP infrastructure for their applications directly, right? They can pretty much tag those instances or the infrastructure that might automatically come up. They don't have to do anything. Right from the DevOps pipeline, they can simply tag those resources and Appranix will automatically protect them, right? So nothing in between. They don't have to change their, any of the developer-centric approach. It's very, very straightforward. So we are kind of doing the shift left, promoting the shift left idea for resiliency.
Absolutely. I think one of the, I guess one of the questions too is like around like those, as far as those design work for SLAs and SLOs work. Obviously, every application has a little bit more value than the rest. Some can, take a little bit of a, can take a little bit higher of a restore time. Other ones, mission critical, need to be up and running. But where's that? Where does Appranix really sit within that? Within lowering those SLA, or what's like the lowest limits for SLAs and SLOs that the product can go?
Absolutely. So when you think about setting the policies, again, based on your policies, your application requirements, but as I can, set up here, you can see, you can push it to 15 minutes. If you go to one of the policies here, let me show you what you can do. If you go in here, you choose the protection frequency time, you have to click on that load more, you can go up to 15 minutes. Right? And I would say I would not recommend for all the instances. I would recommend only for those instances that are really, really crucial for you to capture the data at 15 minutes interval, because you don't have zero to life type of capability built into GCP, and that's when you tend to use this policy to push it every 15 minutes, because it is incremental. Sometimes what is it is counterintuitive. Just because you're doing a frequent capture of the data, is it going to be a problem? What happens is that if you have a lot of change rate, if you waited for, let's say, 4 hours, the amount of data that needs to be captured by the Google storage system and moved through the networking might take time. In that case, it may be actually advisable to go lower in terms of your RPO. So you could say, put it at 15, put it at 30. That way, whenever the change happens, it's basically just snapping up. And then internally, in the background, Google storage system automatically moves those changed copies over to another copy. That way, you don't have to do anything. You don't see those data moments, right? And Google continues to improve one of their already existing powerful networking infrastructure. So, 5 years down the line, it will be maybe 10 times faster, right? You could still bring down that RPO further and further. In fact, we are working with the Google product teams to do something like a 30-second snapshots. That will be very, very useful if, let's say, if your customers had a bad deployment, because the entire environment is captured in 30 seconds, right? If you have a crucial deployment that is going to go through and the developers are pushing you to do the deployment, but the SREs are thinking twice and let's say go for it, and for some reasons that they didn't expect, obviously the application fails. Now they need to revert back really, really fast. Now you can, with the new capability, once Google releases that fast snapshots, we'll incorporate that capability into our policies as well. So you could really push it beyond what you might have experienced in your traditional backup and recovery tools.
Absolutely, it's a whole new world in the cloud. I mean, it's
right.
Just being API driven in itself has like really opened the doors for a lot of these automations. And so the fact that you guys are built your DR solution around the concepts of APIs and being able to utilize those directly from basically utilizing the tools that the cloud providers have available, and creating that as a DR solution versus having to write software in itself to replicate and automate and do all this just makes life that much easier. And very cloud forward too. So either way, I noticed we're here at the end of the time. Govind, if there's any other thought or any other questions in the chat, or just wanted to, just kind of, I think we're at a good time to start wrapping it up here.
Absolutely. Again, we are available at any point in time if you want to, bring up a customer and then have a conversation about their basic, start with backup in the same region or complete DR if they are interested in kind of having another copy of it, or for test dev purposes or chaos engineering purposes. Again, it's all based on Google's well architecture principles, right? So you could go and check out the architecture framework. Google advises customers to adapt that framework. And one of the, we cannot solve all the problems, obviously. We pretty much focus around the reliability component of that architecture framework. In that, there is so much tile involved for the SREs, so much scalability requirement, frequent testing is involved. All of that will be taken care of by Appranix. And the rest, obviously, there are other possibilities to take care of the security and things like that, but we take care of the resiliency component of the GCP infrastructure from an application-centric perspective. Great. Thank you. Really appreciate your time. I know you had choice, but you had chosen to come to us in terms of listening to what we can do from a backup and DR perspective from an application-centric, and we are changing the game to be an application resilience as opposed to just a feature like backup. So thank you very much, and thank you, Seth. I really appreciate your time as well. Really, really, thankful for allocating an hour of your time.
Of course.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody.